Hello, this is Wython, and I'm just going to be going over some important things you should know about USACO. This was my club meeting, so there's going to be some stuff about like roles, so I'm just going to skip over that. But yeah, anyways, here are the 4 steps that you want to know when you're solving USACO. First step is to actually understand the problem, what you're finding, how you're going to do it, right? This is probably the second most important step, other than, I would say, pseudocoding it. And I find this really important because around 90% of the actual problem is like super easy to understand. Some part of it is even like useless, I would say. Like it'll say Farmer John really likes apples. That's why he's doing this. Like you don't need to know that. And then the other 10% is some very important information. And if you don't get that down, you will often miss the entire question, not get a single case, which just means you've just been coding for like no reason for like however long, an hour. So understand the question to its extent. Number 2, like I said, is probably the most important step for me at least. I'll be going more in depth in the next slide, but yeah. So step 3, you're actually coding it, or step 2, you want to like understand how you're going to code it. So like, I'll get the input, I'll iterate through it in this method. And then once you've got that all figured out, you go to step 3, you'd actually code it. And then step 4, you debug it if there isn't like, if it's like giving you errors, right? Just fix it. So yeah, going more in depth on step 2. This is to find the trick, right? Trick is basically the algorithm. An algorithm in the green is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations. In short, trick, right? That's why I say trick, because algorithm, pretty complicated. Almost every USACO problem or every USACO competition, you always are required to find the algorithm, right? This algorithm you'll need it because if you brute force it, you'll only get a fraction of the test cases, right? There's 14, you'd get like 7, sometimes only 4. And with the algorithm trick, you'll often get more. Sometimes it's on 100, sometimes you'll get like 90%, but that's, usually good enough, at least to pass. Finding this trick won't be easy because, you're given 3 problems in 4 hours. You're not going to find it in like 2 minutes, right? You're going to read through it, probably go through the brute force, and then maybe 10-15 minutes later, you'll find the actual algorithm. And there is no one algorithm, so it's pretty difficult to have like steps to find the actual algorithm. You kind of just have to like almost plug and chug, right? But there is usually like a side criteria, like, oh, it needs to have less than 3 loops, right? But yeah. Step 3, this is just coding. So yeah, I was mentioning this a little bit earlier. You want to find a brute force first because that'll guarantee you at least some points, right? If you want to pass this exam, you're not going for 100%. You're going for around that 700, 750 point mark. So here's what I would do. I would find the brute force question first, right? Or method first. That'll get you 1 through, or not 1 through 7, like around 4 through 7, but right. And then once you get that, you actually don't even have to solve the rest of the problem. I would honestly go to the next problem, brute force that, go to the next problem after that, and brute force, right? There's 3 questions. If you brute force it, you get around like 500 points. You only need 250 more, right? So after you brute force all of them, choose one of the 3. Usually it's the first one that you can, most easily solve the algorithm with. So yeah, but get the brute force out the way. Yep, so ideally, you want to get 100 on the first question because, apologies, because it's usually the easiest. Sometimes in some years it became really hard and question 3 was the easiest, but once you go through all 3, you can kind of tell which one is, hard and easy. And then question 2 and 3, you just want to brute force. It's not guaranteed to get 70 every time, but usually brute force, it gets you like 40 to 70, and if you get 100 on the first one, 40 through 70 on 2 and 3, you'll pass. So here's the points. If you got 650, you probably didn't pass. If you get 700, it depends because every year the cutoff is, in this general area, 700, 750 sometimes, right? But yeah, 750 is usually almost guaranteed. Like if somebody told me that, I'd be like, yeah, you passed. All right, so USACO, the two most difficult problems is, or types of problems is time constraints and edge cases. I personally think time constraints are the hardest because that usually means your algorithm is wrong and you pretty much have to resolve the whole problem. Let's say you want to iterate through 10 lines, you have to find certain combination of numbers, right? I brute force it, right? I just check each line and I get the right answer, but it takes 5 seconds too long. So the time constraint means I have to completely redo my algorithm and there is some sort of trick that I did not solve for correctly. And like I said, this is why I think step 2 is the most important, because pseudocode, it does take a while, and you need to think pretty hard about it. Edge cases, they're also very difficult because once you do find an answer and you're like, oh yeah, you're confident, and it says you're wrong, there isn't much you can do. USACO does not let you see the test cases, so you almost have to make your own sometimes, and even then it's hard to think of a combination that your algorithm can't solve for. Usually edge cases mean you got 3-ish wrong. It really does depend on the year because test input can be millions of lines and cases 3 through 14 might have one in those millions of lines. So